All right. Hello, service coordinators. You are listening to the second edition of the Service Coordinator Podcast with Dan Berger and Tara Wanger.
Hi.
Tara is on the Zoom call with us right now, as well as Kyle Beltz. Kyle is a regional senior service coordinator here at National Church Residences. Unfortunately, Kyle does not have a camera on his computer, so we don't get to see his face. But that doesn't matter in all the different places we throw this podcast out there anyway, other than YouTube. So no big deal. So thanks for joining us. We had a ton of people comment about how great of an idea the Service Coordinator Podcast was. So thank you very much for reaching out. And we are happy to bring you the first real podcast. So Kyle, why don't you start off and kind of just tell us about yourself, how you got to National Church Residences, how long you've been here, how you got in this role as a regional senior service coordinator. And then we're going to get into some questions about COVID and how you've been able to deal with that throughout the past year with the service coordinators that fall under you and you mentor and all that good stuff. So Kyle, why don't you tell us about yourself?
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And I started with National Church Residences back in 2010. So I just hit my 10 years earlier this month and got a nice vacuum in the, as part of the reward program. So that was fun. But my story is pretty simple. I actually got the job right out of college. So I was working in advertising while going to school for my bachelor's degree. And this kind of came up for our local area. And I had done internships kind of around working with seniors and some sort of, case management or resource referrals. And so it actually ended up being a good fit, and they hired me, and I started at a site that we still have in Ypsilanti at Clark East Tower. And then when we officially bought Clinton Place, I actually put in for a transfer and came here, and that it was closer to home and worked out wonderfully. And in the meantime there, rather than going back for my master's degree, National Church actually kind of more formalized the senior and regional service coordinator programs. And so I applied for the senior initially and got that. And then once the regional service coordinator that was in my spot beforehand, we actually had two people kind of come and go as they got promoted within or whatnot, whatever there was going on there. And so I applied for that after being a senior, I think for about a year and a half or so, and then got the regional position. And it was a great fit for me and has kept me here since.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah, Kyle, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do as a regional senior service coordinator?
Sure. So I actually have 3 senior service coordinators that work under me. So we have a team of 4. So my job as the regional service coordinator is to both help them and take calls from service coordinators and do some mentoring. So that can be anything from calls about documentation to policy and procedure to, I might be struggling, what can I do, or do you have do you have some different ideas? And then one of the things that I really like about the regional position is that they wanted to involve somebody that was doing the job in the hiring process. And so I actually do the interviews and I help either managers or the regional portfolio leaders kind of either review resumes, and depending on which area we're hiring for, I'm somehow part of that hiring process where I'm doing an interview with a candidate to make sure that we're getting somebody with the experience or skills or something that can kind of transfer into the service coordinator position, so that we're not hiring somebody who's maybe blind to the position or has some sort of experience working with seniors or whatever that might look like.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think we were really interested to have you on the podcast today, not only because of the story that you'll share today with how your site has dealt with COVID, but also because as a regional senior service coordinator, you obviously have been a huge support to the senior service coordinators and other service coordinators that work for National Church Residences, to give them that mentorship and guidance and support throughout this entire time. So we'll get into kind of both of those different sides of things. How have service coordinators been dealing across our portfolio with COVID, and also talk through kind of how that has affected your site. Let's start with that second thing first. So I'm wondering if you could just kind of high level talk about the journey your site has had with COVID since, roughly February, March time.
Yeah, our site's it's been a unique one for sure. So we got Michigan spiked as a state very quickly at the beginning of COVID. So our building, we had a couple cases here, a couple deaths as well. So we actually, right towards the very beginning of COVID, right when it was starting to show up in the news, our site got hit kind of in line with like the news and kind of that scare, and kind of as everybody was really worried about it, we were right in line with that. And so, while everybody was worried about it, so were our residents and whatnot. And so that was a really difficult to deal with at the beginning, because that was, as people were trying to struggle and find hand sanitizer and masks and gloves, and there wasn't a particular perfect answer on how to deal with COVID. And so that lasted. We spiked really early, and between the cases that we had, we probably were pretty busy until, well, we actually were very busy until about July. So Macomb County, here where I'm at, for whatever reason, the other counties near us in the Metro Detroit area were very good about getting COVID tests through the health department. For whatever reason, Macomb County kind of struggled with that, and we still don't know the exact reason why, but we weren't able to get a COVID test for our residents until mid-July. And so we had about I have senior building and then townhomes as well. So we had a couple people from the townhomes and about half of the senior building sign up and get a COVID test. Luckily at that point, we had kind of managed it and, kind of followed those CDC directions, the directions we got from National Church, which mimicked the CDC ones very closely. And we had gotten through it at that point. And so by the time we got to mid-July, for at least everybody that got tested, including most of the staff, we didn't have any cases that we knew of, for at least those that got tested. So that was, ours kind of went from like beginning of March to officially like the end of July was kind of our hotspot period.
When we think about, one of the things I thought was very interesting about the story at your site was just the idea that, when we think about everybody trying to figure this out, especially with not getting tons of guidance from HUD, we've never dealt with something like this before, that your site was, as soon as we were writing a protocol, you guys were implementing it because you guys were in the thick of it pretty early. So one thing I wondered is if you could talk with us a little bit about different methods throughout, since March when you were dealing with active cases, but also since active cases, methods that you guys have been using to keep your residents engaged while also being safe. I know we had talked a little bit beforehand, and I thought there were some pretty cool things you were doing with your announcements and stuff like that. So I wondered if you could give us a little bit more information about your role in helping your residents feel taken care of.
Okay, I gotcha. So we were actually the model for a lot of the policies we were writing, because we were dealing with a lot of the upper management stuff and like what's going on here. And so one of the big ones that we were finding, which I will tie into, is kind of the misinformation. So people were getting sick, or they would cough 3 times and immediately think they would have COVID. And there was a lot of information coming out really, really quickly for a lot of the residents. And some of that, some of the stuff, that the blurbs that we got from National Church and even from the CDC can be a little dry and a little bit overwhelming if you're a senior and may not be able to understand everything. So one of the really big things that we were doing is trying to make sure people understood. So we have a announcement system through our whole building, and it's supposed to be used for emergencies only. And we thought, well, if this is an emergency, I don't know what is. So
exactly.
We started using, So we started using that on a regular basis. And I also, with my manager, we also started rewriting all of the handouts that we were giving to the residents so that it was a little bit more in our voice, so that they could tell it was coming from somebody who was familiar, somebody that they knew and hopefully might trust a little bit more than just generic CDC, posters that we were putting up and whatnot. So we would write a we would write kind of a layman's terms in our own words of what the information was coming out. We would deliver it to their door, and then we would get on the loudspeaker and go over it at the same time. So we would just make a couple highlights for whatever was at their door and say, hey, here's the couple highlights, and if you don't know what this means or you still have questions, please call down to the office or to the service coordinator office. And that was one of the really big things that we did that I didn't think it would be as big of a hit. Like that was kind of, I don't know, like not second nature to me, but it seemed like an easy one to do, right? I didn't think much of it. And all of a sudden, when everybody else is scared and they're getting some of this, they're getting your voice over the loudspeaker, they're getting hopefully kind of what sounds like your voice in a letter or whatnot. I didn't realize the impact that would have to try and keep people, just calm and feel like, somebody was looking out for them, getting the proper information in a way that they could understand. So I didn't realize the value of it when we did it, but it turned out to be probably one of the biggest things that we did here.
What month did you guys start doing that?
That was still in March. We got
March.
on that one pretty quickly because they started putting out some of the information of like close down the building and whatnot. And we went a little overboard with that and started screening everybody that came in the building. And then we had to learn kind of to back off a little bit for some of the deliveries and some of the family members visiting that were essential. And once we kind of backed off on that, we found a little bit better middle ground to kind of say, hey, here's some of the information and whatnot. So.
How many residents are at your property?
So we have a 200-unit senior building, and then we have 83 townhomes as well. So altogether, between the townhomes and some of the aides and the couples and stuff, we have just under 500 residents total for the whole property.
Wow. So in March, April, were the residents just scared to death? Would they not come out of their apartments, or were they, just walking around like normal? How did they take it?
You know what? I have to say our residents were pretty good about taking it seriously. And Terry, your other question at the beginning was kind of some of the comparison with the other service coordinators that I had. And Texas got hit a lot later than us. So when I was talking to a couple of Texas service coordinators that were struggling, one of the things that I didn't think would be a benefit is that we got our cases here and we're struggling with it right when everybody was still taking this very, very seriously. So, it kind of worked on our benefit to kind of get people on board with it instead of trying to push against it or being angry about it. They at least understood where we were coming from. And the first death that we had here was from a married couple. So they were the first two that passed away. And she in particular was a very active resident here. And so when she passed, the family gave us permission to let the residents know who had passed and what the cause it was. And so we asked them and said, are you okay with this? Because we're starting to see some of our residents maybe not get it or maybe not take it as seriously. And so we asked the family permission, and they just said this is awful. Please do so. If you can make people understand what this disease can do, their loved one passed away in the hospital without saying goodbye in the height of COVID when you couldn't visit the hospital. And so they said, please, please, please do whatever you can. We showed them the letter ahead of time. And they said, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And so we put that out, and I think that really got people to kind of understand, like, it's here, and, this person that we knew who, we generally saw every day, she was down here going to dialysis every day, huge card player, she was in the community, right? You knew her. So that, I think, got people really to kind of understand what that meant and kind of stick with it a little bit longer than some of the communities I've heard about after the fact.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I wonder, Kyle, can you talk with us a little bit about how your site has dealt with loss and grief during this time?
Whew, that's a tough one because, for a lot of it, you couldn't do funerals at certain points. You couldn't do a lot of those standard grieving process. So we really promoted for a little bit there the resident call-to-call line that we had sent that out and had people sign up for people who wanted to either be called or have to call other people. And so we used that for a little bit. That kind of over time kind of just didn't take off as much as I wanted it to, just because residents who were friends were calling each other anyways. But the grief and the loss was a big one. It was a lot of just letting people know what happened, letting them know that they could contact families. So we were really big on saying, you know, if somebody passed away, you know, do you mind if we put up notices or let people know? Because that's not something we generally did before. We would let the family kind of grieve in private, and we would offer it, but we'd let the family kind of take the driver's seat for that one a little bit. So I think we got more involved in that, just to let residents know what's happening, and let that neighbor that you saw go to the hospital, we were a little bit more open because we were talking to the family members. And I don't know if a single family member that said, no, please keep this private. Most people were no, to tell the neighbors, let them know what's going on, and please let them know to be safe and to take this seriously. So I saw a lot more of that. And so I think that helped with the grieving a little bit more. Just so that they didn't have to wonder anymore or wait. They got to know right then and there, and kind of start that healing process a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, even though this is a really heavy topic to discuss, I think it's really important because service coordinators, especially those that serve seniors, deal with loss and grief, whether that's residents in their building passing away, or it's just helping to guide residents through loss of independence maybe, or loss of friendships, or, you know, seniors are at a phase of life where they may be navigating loss more frequently than other people in other phases of life. So I think it's a really important thing to think through. And so I also wonder, could you share any kind of tips or ideas you might have for other service coordinators dealing with loss or grief at their sites, things that they might be able to do to help their residents, and also maybe in terms of self-care, things that work for you or things you think are helpful?
For the residents, the best one I can say is information, and let people, you know, in this time, let people have their feelings. A lot of times, you know, you want to try and justify it or remind people some of the positives or the wonderful life somebody led, and you kind of have some of those like platitudes that just come naturally with grief. And I think in this one there's a lot more fear because people are, you know, people at least here were dying of COVID, and as a senior, I think you kind of get used to, you know you're at the end of your lifespan. You don't know if that's going to be 5 or 10 years, but you know that's more of a possibility than maybe it was in the past. And when somebody dies of COVID, it's not that thing that, you know, you're supposed to die of old age, right? Or maybe a health issue. Like that was more in the wheelhouse because people were used to hearing that. COVID was this new thing that was scary, and it's not supposed to be happening, and it has all these symptoms and these just, you know, even if you do survive, then there was these longer lasting symptoms that I'm already a senior and I've already got enough issues. I don't need more. And so I think the information was the big one. And I think kind of supporting residents to not only call each other, but to stay safe was the main one, because that gives you some of that semblance of control back to the situation a little bit, to stay safe and to reach out to somebody else who might have felt that loss. So for the couple of the residents that we did have, you know, for their friends, we encouraged them to talk to each other about it, because you couldn't go out, and many of the families didn't do funerals, but you could go out and at least talk to each other about it. And then they, you know, I had a lot of residents call me over the phone. We would talk on the phone once a week, or they would reach out, you know, so some of the other staff members had a very close relationship with a couple of them. So we, you know, every staff member kind of helped out if you had that individual relationship with a resident, whether it was maintenance doing work orders, or I had one that really loved the manager. So, you know, we kind of all balanced that out, so it wasn't, you know, single-handedly one person's job. You got to grief and tell anybody who you wanted to about that story, and kind of, you know, kind of work through it. For yourself, for myself, I wish I knew the answer for that. Maybe use your vacation time. You know, I know I've got a ton built up just because I didn't take any during all of this. So that's one thing I could have definitely done better. The second one is to probably slow down a little bit, which sounds counterproductive because it's super busy. It's a busy time, and my job has changed quite a bit. But the one thing I've done really good at, actually our staff has probably done really good at, is just slowing down a little bit and understanding that some things look different. And I've gotten a lot better about not putting the I should do this or I need to do this or whatnot. I've gotten really good about not putting that on myself, just so I don't walk out of here going crazy and that I still want to come in the next day. I think that's been a big one for me, is just forgiving myself a little bit and just saying, you know what, I'll do what I can. If all I'm doing today is delivering food, that's what today is, and that just leave it at that, and just trying not to make the I should have done this a little bit more, and just letting that stay where it is. I think that's probably been my big one.
How do you think you were the biggest support, or what was the biggest support that you were able to lend to the service coordinators that were under you? What kind of questions were they coming with? What did they need help with? And how were you able to help them out?
So I do have to say, the benefit of being one of the first people to get cases that at least I know of in the company, or at least in my world, one of the service coordinators, one of the first service coordinators to really have cases here and deaths. One of the things that when people would call, it gave me, it wasn't just somebody else that didn't know what it looked like or what it was going through or what their day-to-day was. I think it gave me a perspective to say, no, I did exactly what you did in my own building in my own way. And so I think it helped me relate to other people quite a bit more. I actually had one service coordinator in Texas in particular called me a couple times and really reached out, and I didn't realize the difference that some of that stuff would make, or the timing that the timing would make. By the time she got cases in her building in Texas, we had the service coordinator support line. We had a corporate system set up to kind of support people, reach out, do some calling from where you guys are at, or from more, remotely or whatnot, so that the service coordinator could kind of focus on a little bit more of like the stuff that had to happen at the site. And she also had it towards, COVID's not over, but like quote unquote towards the end of COVID, because then, politics changed and public opinion changed a little bit on that. And so she got her building with COVID when people were kind of almost like bored of dealing with it, or sick of dealing with it, or sick of hearing about it. And so where I got people that it was right at the height and everybody took it seriously, she was kind of working with people that were like, no, this isn't a big deal. And so I think that was a big one where we could kind of talk, and I could say, hey, don't worry about that so much. Like, let the people that are calling to help you and doing the stuff that you just can't be in two places at once for, let them help, and just take care of the stuff that only you can do because you're at the site. And I think the other one would have been reminding people to try and go a little bit of, do some of those things that wouldn't normally be part of the job description, but just, it's an emergency. So just do what makes, do what you're going to be okay with putting your head down at the pillow at night. So like the example I have is like one of my residents who tested positive, was quarantined at home, didn't have symptoms, but we were trying to encourage him not to go out. So I did a couple grocery trips for him. Not the biggest deal in the world, right? I think I went out and bought 4 items. It wasn't a huge deal, but that would be something that normally I wouldn't kind of cross that barrier a little bit. And this one was like, my options were either he has to go out and get his groceries, or and expose everybody that he comes in contact with, or I can do a quick 15-minute run to the local store and just get him the couple things that he needs. And I think reminding people that you get put in those situations like on a normal day-to-day anyways, and this was a lot different. And to just kind of use your best judgment and remember you're a human being first, and kind of a service coordinator second, and kind of work with both of those, and just kind of do what sits right with your heart. So
yeah, I think those are all really good pieces of advice. I feel like for me, when I think about all of this time, the theme of giving yourself some grace, giving yourself permission to have something take more time, or to let things be different. I think that's a huge thing that it can be very hard to balance, but is really helpful to keep in mind. So when we think about kind of, we are hopefully anticipating a world in the future where COVID is something we don't have to deal with, and we can go back to maybe what things used to be like a little bit more. But I'm guessing that even though COVID has brought a lot of hardship and, that there's hurt that goes along with it, I'm wondering if there's any kind of lessons learned or things that you're thinking of that it's like, wow, I actually the constraints that COVID put on me helped me to innovate. And so I am going to go forward with this new way of doing something. Are there any things that you're thinking like, oh wow, like this is something that I'm going to do no matter what going forward?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Shopping for the residents.
No, no. Yeah, that's there's a couple. So I've had to. Let me go back. For a couple of the like socialization portion, we did right after we got COVID tested in July. I was finally comfortable enough to say, okay, let's do something. We'll do socially distancing. We'll wear masks, and before Michigan winter comes, we'll do it outside. So we did. Pace did a ice cream party and like informational meetings. So they came and reminded people about the PACE program, and they did ice cream and stuff. And it was just a reason to kind of get people out, get them out of their apartments to come down for something, and do that, and just see each other, laugh a little bit, and just feel like COVID wasn't the main concern for just one day, right? In the meantime, we've done, I've got socially distanced bingo now, where instead of coming down for bingo, they are pulling numbers daily and posting them on the community boards, so that it gives people a reason to come out kind of in small doses to just look forward to something and see if your numbers hit that day or whatnot, and just have something to look forward to for the day. So I do appreciate trying to find some of those smaller items that, it's not that big party that we're used to, but you're trying to find other ways to kind of just keep people going for the day and kind of still have a sense of community. I do appreciate trying to do stuff like that. We've also got, I've got the guts set for like a scavenger hunt outside before the weather kind of turns on me here. So, and I've got for when the winter months come, I've got like an idea for a writing workshop that I typed up that one of the residents, she kind of inspired it about, everybody says, I wish I could tell my story to somebody. And she was very big on that, and she kind of helped inspire that one and worked with me. Because I've never done something like that. And so we kind of worked together to say, what would help you kind of prompt you to write a story, and how could I help? And so we actually have a system for that. And once the snow kind of comes and people are, inside a little bit more, we're going to start that one and have like a writing workshop so that each person can kind of tell their story. And so I think that I do like some of the innovation in trying to maybe slow down a little bit, kind of that theme, and like slow down and just do, instead of doing 10 events, just find a couple and just make them hopefully a little bit more impactful and a little bit more thought out, instead of just doing that party that we're used to, right? We know how to do those. So we can throw a party like nobody's business tomorrow if we needed to, because we've just thrown so many of them. But something like that is something that's brand new for me that I've never done before. So
it sounds like from what you're saying that COVID has maybe helped your residents and the staff at your site like really hone in on what matters to people. When you're hit with the threat of not having life as it usually is, what do you cling to? The interpersonal connections, the engagement between staff and residents, just the familiar voice over the PA system. These types of things in normal day-to-day life might feel like they're small things, but they're the things that remind us that we're connected to one another, and that, for us here at National Church Residences, our residents aren't just our clients, they're also kind of our family. And so we want to foster those, that core connection really does matter to not only our residents, but also us as staff when we think about really living out the mission of our organization, as well as when we think about kind of the core of service coordination, helping residents not only have their basic needs met and get their benefits renewed and all those sorts of things, but also having, especially seniors, helping them to age with fulfillment and purpose, and to just be connected to the community at large. Service coordinators play a huge role in that at any time. And when we think about the impact of COVID, that really helps to bring that impact to light.
Yeah, it definitely reminds you of some of the stuff that you take for granted on the day-to-day basis, right? So, the first resident that passed away, she was one that would play cards outside of my office every day when I left. And so I would leave for the day, and I talked to her every single day leaving my office, and she had some sass and some sarcasm to her, and me and her could kind of riff off each other a little bit, and I'd walk out, and we'd both walk away with a smile on their face. And so you forget some of that stuff, and that really comes to light. I mean, you got that when people passed away anyways, right? But when it's in this pandemic and everybody's kind of scared, it's definitely a different story. And so some of those connections that you're making with people from, your residents with memory issues, because I'm sure a lot of people have had residents with memory issues that don't quite understand how to quarantine or how to socially distance, or I've heard for service coordinators about how many residents come down and say they forgot their masks, right? So you're trying to find this balance of being their connection to a community, and still I'm definitely more of a police officer with the mask police now, so trying to walk that balance and remember that they're your friend and they're your family and they're also your resident and kind of your client, and trying to balance that relationship for all of them, and just walk that thin line to say, I need to be the enforcer a little bit, but I can't go too hard on that, because I also want them to come to me if they're struggling. Whatever that struggle might be, whether it's mental health or something where you just need your benefits and some paperwork filled out. You still want to be that resource for a person, not the person who's constantly yelling at them. So those interpersonal connections have definitely taken a top rise, and just to slow down a little bit, maybe focus on those rather than just paperwork or even some of the food delivery, right? They're important and those things need to happen, but it doesn't do you any good if the person doesn't understand that you're doing it because you care about them. And sending that message off and getting that message out, whether it's interpersonal or whether it's just trying to do a new event that you haven't done before, people pick up on that, right? People pick up on the fact that you're trying. And I actually had quite a few residents during this. We would get together as a staff and do lunch and stuff just to take a break for the day, and we would get lunch and just eat pizza in our closed community room or whatever that might be. And I can't tell you how many residents I had come up to me and say, it's really cool that you guys all get along so well, because we see that and we pick up on that. And it's nice to see that you guys aren't fighting and you guys aren't, we know you're struggling, but you're not fighting or bickering, or you guys are still positive and you're getting together, and that's nice to see. And so we've kept that going a little bit, a couple times a week, just to kind of, because it was one of those small ones that we didn't think people noticed or cared about even, and then all of a sudden it's kind of that source of inspiration or calmness, whichever way you want to go with it. So,
well, I'd agree. I can totally see that. I know that relationship between the property manager and the service coordinator is huge, and I can't imagine. You might not even see it now. You might see it a year from now, how much this has actually brought your property, your community together, and just probably haven't even been able to see it yet. Tara, did you have any other questions for Kyle? I think this has been great, and Kyle, we would definitely like to bring you back on down the road. We plan on doing a lot more of these, so thank you so much. Do you have any parting words, Kyle, or words of advice for all those service coordinators out there that are now looking up to you all over the country?
I don't think that's quite happening, but I will say, I will definitely say, I can't say it enough, to just slow down and forgive yourself a little bit, because you can't be everywhere, and, come to work and do what you can do, and hopefully you can leave the day with your head held high, and there's, There's nothing stopping you from pushing yourself a little bit and trying to come up with new things, but also remember that we're also going through this too. So even though we're the expert at work, we are still human beings that don't quite know what's going on, and we've got family that we have to watch out for, or friends, or whatever you've got going on in your personal life. And so I've definitely would say to, remember to slow down and to be innovative and to try and do what you can at work, but just to slow down a little bit and forgive yourself and just do the best that you can, because people will notice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kyle. Thank you, Tara. Service coordinators, remember to please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're going to be watching us. Also, please leave a comment if you can do that. The comments were turned off somehow. I don't know, but I think I got it fixed. And then also please subscribe, whether you get on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever it might be. Please subscribe, leave a comment, like it, whatever, all that good stuff. But thank you guys so much. And we have another podcast lined up for next week. So hopefully we'll just start dishing these things out and kind of go from there and see what we come up with. So Kyle, again, thank you. And everybody have a good weekend.